Hey, it's Lawrence with High Intensity Business. Just a super quick intro from me before we get into today's episode. Today's episode is actually a exclusive membership only masterclass from 2021, but it's so good that I felt it needed to be published on the public podcast. And this is actually a masterclass with Luke Carlson from Discover Strength. So Luke is the founder and CEO of Discover Strength, a very successful personal strength training business in the US. It's all about exercise instruction, and more specifically, MedX protocols for the most part. So just to give you a few highlights, we do a deep dive into the Discover Strength approach. We cover all sorts of MedX machines, torso arm, pull down, that's the same thing, chest press, leg press, etc., etc. We talk about detailed setups, grips, range of motion. Do you lock out or not lock out? Static holds, heavy negatives, instruction tips for older clients and joint issues, common mistakes that Luke sees hip pros make, how to increase intensity and progress weight, coaching clients to train less often but more intensely, and much, much more. And before we get into the episode, just very quickly, if you like a masterclasses like this and content like this, please consider joining High Intensity Business, where we do a masterclass like this every single month on either the science and application of training or the business side, and we alternate month to month. There's also community, courses, live expert session, weekly calls, everything you need to start and grow a successful strength training business. So if you go to school.com/HIB, there'll be a link on the screen and a link below, and you can go check that out. If you're completely new and you're not quite ready for that, please consider downloading the Hip Business Reset, which is an audio course I did with Luke on how to start and scale your strength training business. There'll be a link below to download that resource as well. Anyway, without any further ado, please enjoy this masterclass on exercise instruction with Luke Carlson. Welcome everyone to the February 2021 live Q&A and Hip Business membership. We do this every single month, and we tend to alternate between business and personal training. So one month we might focus on retention or sales or marketing, and then the following month we'll focus on something regarding personal training. It might be exercise instruction, like we're talking about today, or how you measure workouts, or the nuances of someone's particular style of personal training. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by Discover Strength founder and CEO Luke Carlson. And most of you know Luke and are familiar with his work and the enormous contribution he's made to the podcast and the membership. So I probably don't have to say much more. Today, we're going to focus on exercise instruction. Maybe that's quite self-explanatory, but essentially, we're just going to focus on how does Luke and how do his team at Discover Strength instruct exercises on the various machines or the various kind of free weight or bodyweight exercises that they use in their business? I'm really curious and interested to learn about this so I can make sure that we're using correct biomechanics and correct form with the exercises we utilize at Optima. I'm sure many of you guys are interested in learning how you can improve the way you instruct certain exercises too. And I think ultimately the point of this is making sure the client gets a great workout, and that we can retain that client over the long term and also increase our chance of generating referrals and growing the business. In terms of how this is going to go, if you have a question, please raise your hand on the control panel, and I'm very happy to unmute you so you can ask the question. Or if you prefer, you can just type in the Q&A box, and Luke and I can actually read the questions. We might ask a question of you to actually refine your question. This will be recorded for members who can't attend. So please bear that in mind, and perhaps don't say anything that you wouldn't want people to listen back to. But just bear in mind, this is a private community of your colleagues in high intensity training, a fairly niche community. So that's it to begin with. So let's get into the main of this episode. So let's see. I'm going to see if anyone's got any questions. So again, please use whatever method you prefer, whether that's typing in the Q&A or raising a hand, and I will unmute you and you can ask a question. If we can keep it to exercise instruction, that would be great, because then it would keep this as a seminal piece of content on that particular topic, which then obviously yourself and other members can reference later. All right, so I'm just going to kick us off because I think some people will be sort of listening passively as well. Luke, I'm going to be selfish here and ask you about some of the machines we use. Can you talk to me about how you instruct the MedX Torso Arm? Perhaps we can start there.
Yeah, so MedX Torso Arm, the original model has a curved handle, not adjustable. The newer models you can use, or a retrofitted model has 3 different options, or a minimum of 3 different options. Which handle do you have, Lawrence?
We have the curved handle, which also
Okay,
can be adjusted. If you pull out, you can spin it round.
you can spin it around. So
Yeah,
it's
so you
one
can spin
loop,
it so
but you
it's
still move.
correct. Yeah.
So, but is it really curved then? That sounds like it's not the curved handle. It sounds like
Well,
it's
it
the long rectangle. It's not like a U at the end.
correct. It's the former. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So that's the newer handle. So I look at it as there's like 3 ways you can use that. A classic supinated grip, a neutral grip. So you have the handles pointing essentially away from you, or you can rotate the handles out and you can use a pronated grip. The grips that we like the most are supinated, we use the most often. And then we use pronated. And then probably lastly, neutral. And anyone that's used the machine extensively will understand that the limitation of the neutral is just a little bit of a downward angle to that handle, and it'll just slip right out of your hands. As neutral grip pulls go, and there's a lot of good neutral grip pulls, that handle is just tough to hold on to for most clients. So we'll generally use supinated as our standard. I think you can get great variation by using the neutral also. So here's how we'll set it. First of all, and by the way, this is a great exercise to start with because there's so many different ways to use this machine and instruct this machine. And let me just back up and make this really, really brief, Lawrence. When we decide how we're going to use a machine, what's our process? So we want to understand the biomechanics. We want to understand what musculature are we actually trying to instruct, right? And then what we'll do is we'll look at what the manufacturer suggests. And then what we'll do is we'll talk to what Ray Dalio would call believable others. So on almost every exercise we perform, literally Bill DeSimone. I call maybe James Fisher. I talk to everyone and get all their ideas, pool them together and understand, well, what do we want to actually do? So we're understanding the biomechanics, but then I'm trying to be influenced by other colleagues' approach, right? So, Tim Ryan gave me a lot to think about on the MedX leg press. Well, I talked to Bill DeSimone after that, and he gave me a lot to think about that totally contradicted what Tim Ryan said. And so it's this process of sorting through the ideas of believable others and then the biomechanics, right? And then deciding how do you want to move forward. So that's our process. And if you have more questions on that, we can definitely go into that. That process is really important. You can't lean too far to just listening to someone else you respect, and you can't lean too far to just looking at the biomechanics. You need, I think, a really well-rounded approach. So when we use the torso arm, we have the hips pressed all the way back. We instruct the client to have your low back and your butt touching the frame of the machine all the way back. Then we want the seatbelt as tight as possible with the hips pressed back. We will have the upper body at a forward angle. So the upper body will not be upright. You will not be leaning back. You will be at a slight forward angle the whole time. But we say we do not want you to crunch forward. We want you to be at a slight forward angle the whole time. That angle should not change throughout the exercise. So if you're in a stretch position, an extended position with the humerus, if you're in a contracted position, a flex position or an extended position, the position of the torso should change, slight forward angle. And that slight forward angle is essentially the angle that the weight is going to pull you when you're in the extended position. So we'll stay consistent with that at the entire time. We will come all the way down until essentially the bar, the handle is below the chin. The humerus is tucked parallel with the spine. When we come up, we will actually instruct our clients to stretch all the way up. We have no bend in the elbow. The elbow has to straighten out completely. The shoulders will actually stretch up. We set the machine so that when you're in a fully stretched position, the machine doesn't bottom out. That means a heck of a lot of clients are at the lowest position. They're a 0, a 1, or a 2. Now, once in a blue moon, we'll have a client stop short of a stretch position if they have some type of elbow or shoulder issue. But for everyone else, we will actually stretch on top, stretch the shoulder, stretch the elbow. Maybe we get a little bit more scapular retraction that way when we're stretching the scapula forward on every repetition. Okay. When we're in the contracted position, we do not teach a forward crunch. We actually say avoid the forward crunch. Be conscious of not crunching forward. We want your chest to stay tall, maintaining the same forward angle as your elbows come down to the torso. So let me
Why?
just pause there and you can ask follow-ups.
Yeah. Why not crunch in that position?
On every exercise, you have to start with this question. What's your objective? So on every exercise, before you start the exercise, you should know what your objective is. Is it to perform a repetition, right? That's never the objective. Or is it to target specific musculature? And never have we ever looked at the torso arm as a rectus abdominis exercise. And so therefore we wouldn't do a crunch at the bottom, right? We have plenty of other ways to train the abs in a more efficient, I think, effective manner. We're not going to try to get abdominal involvement on the torso arm. Now, side note, a chin up, by the way, if you do a chin up or a weighted chin up, there's no avoiding the fact there's going to be extreme abdominal involvement, right? Because you're not seated and seatbelt belted into something. There's going to be passive tension on the abdominal wall the entire time. So we're aware that when we do the chin up, although the intent, the objective is to work the upper back and the biceps, we're still going to get abdominal musculature. We're not targeting abdominal musculature on the torso arm. So we'll avoid that crunch. We'll keep a tall posture with the chest up the entire time.
Will you not still have some tension on the abdominals, even if you don't crunch in a pull down anyway?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really, really minimal, really minimal.
Okay. Okay. Just going back to what you're saying about range of motion, really curious. So at full range of motion, at full contraction, are you typically looking for, you said to have the elbows or the humerus in line with the spine. So you're not looking to have the individual pull the elbow back past the spine. Is that right? Or are you,
So that's the one pulling move where you may go beyond the humerus aligned with the spine. And the reason we do that is is because the strength curve is such where there's just a perfect drop off. On any rowing movement we do, not any rowing movement, a number of our rowing movements will just stop where the humerus is parallel with the spine. We won't go any further than that. The torso arm, the MedX torso arm, I just think there's enough drop off where we can pull a little bit further back than that.
do you think, on that same point, do you think, because I'm always conscious of trying to get the individual to be able to pull the handles down so they're almost touching the chest or touching the chest. Do you think that's the wrong focus? Do you think that's not that important? It's more just looking at where the elbow ends up.
So you're not going to probably touch the chest unless you have a seat set where it's realistic to touch the chest. Here's, I think, the key. On every pulling exercise, you just have to standardize. Are we looking at humerus as our endpoint? That's what we're looking at. Are we looking at a bar or some other visual, right? Like the handle, the bar, where the bar ends up. For the torso arm, we actually care more about where the handle ends up than the humerus. We should be mindful that the humerus is definitely parallel or beyond parallel with the spine.
Can you just,
Does that last
James,
comment make sense?
it does, it does. I'm gonna come to one of the James's questions in a moment, but I just wanted you to recap for my benefit, the bit on the seat setting. Can you just remind me how you decide on the seat setting on the torso arm?
Yeah, it's as simple as when they're in a completely stretched position, is the machine bottoming out or not?
Hmm. And is that a good, do you want it to bottom out or not? Sorry.
No, we
So,
don't want it to bottom. We'll set it so you're just a little bit deeper to avoid that bottom out.
and you have the trainer basically take the load at the end of the exercise and lower it down or raise it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the, okay.
I mean, it's literally like half an inch that you're actually moving, right? I mean, it's about to bottom out. If you just dropped it at the fully extended position, that's actually it's humeral flexion. So the flexed position, if you dropped it in the stretched position, it would move, half an inch.
So that means you're always pretty much having the trainer bring the load down to the client in that exercise as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're
Yeah.
moving it like an inch. But
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So last night I actually did the MedX Torso Arm and I did a 260 protocol. So I did the whole weight stack, 2-second concentric, 60 seconds eccentric. Okay. Then I do a breakdown set of like 6 normal reps after that. It's a great protocol that Ellington Darden and Jim Flanagan kind of came up with. And I love it on torso arm, just that heavy 60-second negative after almost, it's not a 1 rep max concentric, but it's a pretty heavy concentric. The problem with that is if your training partner is not strong, it's tough for them to hand you the whole weight stack. And I had a training partner that wasn't very strong and they were like hanging on it to be able to get it to me. But again, they only have to do a hinge. So
Yeah. Okay. Super interesting. That sounds pretty brutal. Okay. Let's see here, James. So I don't know if you see this, Luke, but I'll read it to you anyway. It's in the chat. James said, Is the forward lean intended to shorten the hip flexors and prevent abdominal flexion, e.g., I'm not sure if you answered this a little bit. If starting leaning back, a client might be more likely to lean forward as they pull down.
So it has nothing to do with trying to minimize abdominal involvement. It just has to do with when you're when you're pulling a heavy load and you're moving toward the flex position, so the stretch position, the weight is going to pull you at an angle, and we're trying to not fight that angle. So we're going to have your torso in line with the angle of the pull of the machine. So let me contrast that with like a hammer strength wide pull down. Again, your chest is not up against anything on that machine. That's a more vertical pull. And so we're going to coach to keep the torso completely perpendicular to the floor. You're going to stay totally vertical the whole time because that's in line with the angle of the pull. So you're not fighting the direction of the weight's actually pulling you. The only time that we'll fight the direction of the weight's pulling you is when there's a chest pad or support of some kind. Clearly on any type of rowing movement, your chest is secured up against the pad. And so then it's, you don't have to worry about that fight. But the torso arm pulls you at a slight forward angle. And so we want to maintain that slight forward angle the whole time. Now, again, over the last 15 years, we've tried this a number of different ways. We tried to keep an upright posture. When I do this exercise, when Jim Flanagan trains me, he has me lean all the way back as I do the exercise, right? We've used it a lot of different ways, but we've landed on consistently for about 10 years and just a slight forward angle.
James, I think that probably answers the question, but if you've got any more you want to ask on that, just let me know. Okay. Is there anything else you think is really valuable to add as it relates to the torso arm in terms of how you instruct that exercise? I'm just thinking of anything, thoughts you've got that members can sort of take away and utilize that you think are just really important for getting the most out of this exercise with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's versatility in the machine. That's the biggest strength of that exercise or that particular machine is use a supinated grip, use the pronated grip, use the isolateral function, use a dual poly, use all the different functionality of that machine. So when you're thinking about buying a multi-joint pulling movement, the reason MedX Torso Arm skyrockets to the top of the list is there's just so much variability with it. One of our locations has a pendulum pull down, which is a really good pull down. It just doesn't have as much variety or variation as the MedX does. It's also slower to set and adjust. The strength curve is not as good. Of all MedX machines, the MedX pull down torso arm stands apart in that it just has so much variability in how you use it. So if I'm going to give maybe a piece of advice, I would say from what I can tell, a lot of practitioners that use that machine maybe don't get the most out of it because they're not taking advantage of all the different variation that machine allows.
And did you say the one I have is the old or the new version?
The new.
And that has more variation than the old or less?
Yeah, definitely more. The old was just
Okay.
it's like a hinge handle and you had to use the same position the whole time, which was a fine position. It just didn't have quite as much variation.
Do you know, I haven't even used neutral pronated grip yet at all with myself or clients. So there's a lot to just
No.
supinated, correct. Yeah. Yeah.
But we would normally start someone on supinated, but man, you bought one multi-joint pull movement, you have so much variation in how you do that exercise and you get a different feel on with all the different handles.
Yeah. Final question on this actually. And maybe this will apply to lots of machines. You know, in the event where you don't have that many machines, I mean, we have 7 machines, as you know. We are looking to get more, but we're kind of, I guess, a bit thin on the ground in terms of machines, at least. And we do have dumbbells and some other bits, but we don't have mats down. So I'm not really in a position where I'm using too many sort of free weight or body weight exercises in addition to the machines. So in the spirit of trying to provide more variety, let's say you're doing an AB routine and both had the pull down. Would you be looking to, I mean, obviously you could do like a different protocol, like one week could be just a 2-4 positive failure. Another one could be like breakdown sets like you did with me virtually. And would you even go as far as like having a different grip? I know James is a big fan of this. So having like one week you do supinated and the other week you do pronated or neutral grip. Do you guys utilize different grips
One
for
of
variety?
100%.
Okay.
100% we would do that. So literally the workout A would be supinated, workout B would be pronated, right? And then we do those workouts for 10 weeks or whatever. And then when we get to new workouts, Workout A would be neutral. Workout B would be supinated dual poly. 10 weeks would go by. And then after those 10 weeks, we would literally do supinated single arm only for 8 to 12 reps, left arm only, and then right arm only. Literally have them be completely separated. We could do a protocol where it's a 4x4 protocol, 4 with both, 4 with the left, 4 with the right, 4 with both. So it could take 2 years before we get back to doing a standard set of supinated torso arm.
Wow. And I think we've got the model where the arms are fused, so you can't do sort of unilateral. I think that's correct.
Is that right?
I think so. I should know that. I was going to double check now.
I haven't seen every MedX Torso Arm, obviously, but I didn't even know. I'm naive. I didn't even know they made one that was fused arm where you couldn't.
I could be wrong. I'll double check. Good. I think that's pretty thorough on the torso arm. I know there's other things we could talk about, like different protocols, coaching cues, but I think we'll perhaps leave that for another episode, because it's more of the kind of biomechanics, the basic exercise instruction that I think we want to focus on. So I figured it would probably make sense to move on to a MedX Chest Press as the next exercise. So do you want to describe on again the sort of high level principles that you follow with this?
So this is the one machine that we consistently gap or pin. So there's a gap in the weight stack, and that gap or the pinning of the weight stack represents the starting position. Okay. So a client can just grab the handle and start pushing. Now, the way we used to do it and the way so many practitioners do it, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Jim Flanagan's one of them, where the trainer actually pulls the handle forward so you can grab it, and they don't gap it in it whatsoever. They simply set the machine so that when you're in the fully extended position, the hands are just about touching. So you either avoid complete lockout or you're barely at the point of complete lockout and your hands are touching. So to start off with, I think that is how you should set the back of the seat. So you're almost, the hands are almost touching fully extended position, right? Pretty simple. Why are you doing that? You're getting theoretically more humeral adduction. The humerus is coming closer together. This is why we're doing a MedX chest press and not a barbell bench press. Is the humerus is adducting a little bit more. So we go back to biomechanics. What are we trying to do? Trying to train the chest. What's the role of the chest? The chest contracts and shortens to adduct the humerus. That is all we're concerned with. That's why if you really want to train the chest effectively, according to biomechanics, you do a pec fly. I always think it's interesting that so many HIIT practitioners are into biomechanics, but then they say that you should do multi-joint exercises over single joint exercises. That is ignoring biomechanics, right? Biomechanics say, no, you should do a single exercise if you really want to develop the chest. Okay. So we throw the term around biomechanics too often as kind of, I think, rationale or alibi for why we're doing certain things, but we actually ignore with biomechanics, actual biomechanics. So
interesting.
Set the machine so that the back pad so that you are either barely locking out or you can't quite lock out. And then you set the seat, the one that you're actually sitting on, based on, are you going to use an upright handle? So upright handle to us means the middle of that vertical handle. Are you using a horizontal handle, which means the horizontal handles at a slight angle, or do you split the difference? Those are the three most common ways that I've seen it done. We never use the split the difference. We always use an upright or a horizontal. Our standard is the upright. So when we use the upright, we set it so your hand is right at the center of your chest. The middle of my hand would align with the nipple level of the chest or the torso. If we're using the horizontal handle, it'd be the same thing. Hand is going to be at the center of the chest, which is dramatically going to change that seat position, probably about 4 notches that on the seat that you're actually sitting on, right? You also have to change the back pad because, again, you can probably bring the back pad further forward if you're using a horizontal handle, because you're basically pushing out until that vertical handle is locking out. So you avoid complete lockout. I don't care if someone locks out on a MedX chest press. If they lock out, are they relieving tension? Well, maybe for a millisecond, right? You're transitioning slowly. I have no issue if someone locks out. I don't think it makes the exercise more difficult. I don't think we should lock out or fully extend on a leg press. I think it changes the exercise. On a ball squat, on a chest press, I do not think it matters. If someone locks out, that's fine. We just want to transition out of the lockout fairly quickly. So that's setting up the machine, all right? So it should be pinned or gapped so that you can barely grab the handle and start it on your own. Now, why would you do that? It doesn't really change the strength curve significantly. It doesn't change the effectiveness of the exercise. It just allows you as a trainer, if you weren't there at the end of the set, to take the handle from them, or if they had to set it down suddenly, they wouldn't overstretch the shoulder capsule, right? It's just a little bit of a safety issue for me. And then it allows you, if someone has to avoid an extreme range of motion, you can really quantify what that range of motion is, right? So you'll train so many clients that have a shoulder ailment where they cannot get the last few degrees of a range of motion, or what I would think a full range of motion is. Great, pin it so they're just working the top half, the top 2/3 of the range of motion, the top 3/4 of the range of motion, whatever it is. So that's starting it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Where are you? Like, what would you consider as if someone had a healthy shoulder, and no sort of contraindications there? What would you be willing? Like, what would your standard full range of motion look like? Where does the elbow start in that picture?
So generally, we don't want the hand to go beyond or past the torso. So the hand is like lined up with the front of the chest, or maybe an inch deeper than that. Now I'm trying to think about this. I probably set mine 1 inch deeper than that, or maybe an inch and a half deeper than that. So my hand is probably parallel with my torso and not right at the front of my torso. But for 90% of our clients, it's going to be at the front of the torso, so that the hand is visible in peripheral vision when you're starting the movement, and it's not deeper than that.
Is it typically like a gap 3 or 4, something like that?
That's super accurate. Yeah. Now it depends on are you using a horizontal handle or an upright handle? That'll change where that back pad is, which changes what the gap would be.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on I've heard some of our colleagues say who would actually be far more conservative and have the elbows starting further forward, so maybe starting at a 4, 5, or even 6 gap, because they might have the view that, okay, maybe they're fine now, but like if you're training over a long period of time with the elbow that far back, that could really, create a lot of risk for shoulder injury over time. So maybe there's a risk over the long term. And you guys have trained so many people over such a long period of time, then you would probably have seen this. So what's your take on that?
So I'm not going to say that that's not true. I mean, I've obviously read everything that Bill's written, and I respect it and understand it. And Bill makes a great point that it's easy to say these things when you're 28 years old and you've been training for 10 years, but what happens when you have a 40-year training career? So maybe it's possible. I think these are cliches, but I think when you're minimizing momentum and you're using slow speeds of movement and you're using moderate loads, do you minimize some of that risk potentially? And then this is not a reason not to do that. It's not a reason to not heed Bill's counsel. But we just don't have any evidence at all that says changing the range of motion actually reduces joint pain. And then we have a lot of research on different ways you can reduce joint pain, but limiting the range of motion, I have not seen a single published study that says you're going to reduce chronic joint issues. So that's not a reason not to. I just always like to balance out, like when we go deep into the biomechanics and we say this is now essentially the law. This is how we have to do it. I like to balance it with, okay, that's great. Do we have a single training study? Do we have a single trial, a single intervention study that utilizes that? And we just don't. And I know maybe that study's hard to do. So potentially, I will say this controversial statement. Anybody that I've ever trained with what I would call a SuperSlow background, I'm always shocked by how they set their seats. They set their seats on almost every exercise where they're going through such a limited range of motion. And I think the workout becomes infinitely harder and more effective and greater stimulus if you change that range of motion. I mean, everybody I trained in the Nautilus Nitro leg press, for example, sets the seat where they're barely moving through a range of motion and they're using the whole weight stack. And that applies to so many exercises, overhead presses and chest presses and leg presses and rows. I just tend to be an advocate for a greater range of motion. I always think that changes the stimulus. And what's my rationale for that? I just think it changes the stimulus. Like if I am going to physically be in your facility, I'm going to change every seat setting so you're going through a greater range of motion. Which, by the way, is I think one of the reasons why you don't gap a MedX leg press, right? When you gap a MedX leg press and you're blocking out at the end, you're getting more extension of the femur, theoretically working more glutes, you're minimizing the range of motion at the start of that movement, right? Your femur is not close to your chest. And I think the femur being closer to the chest is really, really, really important in that exercise. I much rather have more range of motion there than more extension of the femur at the end of the movement.
Hang on. Let me just clarify something there. So, with regard to the leg press, how I don't quite understand that. How come you can't gap it and also have a start position where the femur is close to the chest? You can have both, right? Am I missing something there?
Depending on the size of the person, you couldn't physically bring the machine far enough forward. The machine will get to zero and you can't bring it any further forward.
Right, right.
So I'm not tall, but I can't bring the machine far enough forward where I have the femur where I would want it, and also block out of the movement. So then I have to ask myself, what part of that range of motion is better for glute recruitment? Well, we know that it's when the femur is closer to the chest, right? Not when it's extended.
So, just talking about range of motion, this is probably a good time to ask this. You and I have spoken, I think it was during a virtual happy hour or, yeah, some time ago. You were in the airport and you were talking to me about a client of yours who you were giving some honest feedback, and they're an older senior client, and you were giving some honest feedback around the importance you believe in them actually having the courage to do certain exercises that they weren't brave enough to do, like the leg press, but also articulating joints through a full range of motion. Why do you think it's important to train with a full range of motion for someone who has, like an injury or some kind of contraindication, like I don't know, arthritis or something like that, versus like a partial range or a static contraction? I'm just curious to try and understand better why you think full range is important in that particular context, if that's true.
So interestingly, I don't know if I said it like that. I would not push a client to go through a full range of motion. I would push the client to do the exercise, but not push through a full range of motion. The only thing I'm adamant about is we should not be doing time static contractions on machines in our facilities. We should be doing, we can do isometric holds with weight, but we should not do time static contractions. The time static contraction is where you may put the weight in the full weight stack, and then you bring it to you set the movement arm at whatever degree that you want, degree of range of motion, and then you do like 90 seconds of tension or 60 seconds of tension. It builds over time, so you're pushing as hard as you can. Well, why would you not want to do that? Well, one, you can't progress it, right? You can't progress it. So if I'm using a weight and saying, Lawrence, I want you to hold it at this many degrees of range of motion, I can have you hold 40 pounds and next time 44 pounds and 46 pounds. So you're actually getting stronger, right? So progressive overload. And by the way, we say, well, progressive overload doesn't matter. All that matters is failure. Well, then what do you do in a time static contraction for? You can't get to failure with a time static contraction. So we can actually quantify when you fail if it's an isometric hold with weight. That's number one. And number two, this is so incredibly important. One of the main benefits for all of our clients that I don't think we talk about enough, right? It's not strength, it's not hypertrophy, it's improvements in bone mineral density. It's warding off osteoporosis. And in order to do that, we talk about light load, heavy load, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for strength and hypertrophy. It does matter for osteoporosis. You need load on the bone for there to be adaptation. Research is very, very clear on this. If you're doing time static contraction in your facility, I'm overstating this. It's potential malpractice for the client, right? The client is assuming they're getting osteoporosis prevention benefits, and you're denying them of those benefits because you're not giving them any load. Now, clearly in our virtual workouts and the things that we do at home, we have to do that. And is it better than nothing? Heck yes, it's better than nothing. It's awesome. But man, if you have a MedX machine in front of you, if you have a free weight in front of you where you can actually put load on the bone, we have to put load on the bone. So to answer your original question, I definitely think we can go static. I definitely think we can do an isometric hold. I definitely think we can work through a limited range of motion. And James Fisher influenced my thinking on this is he would say, you got to work through a limited range of motion, if at all possible, before you would do a static, because the research is pretty clear that a limited range of motion rep will transfer to full range of motion strength where an isometric hold doesn't transfer to full range of motion strength. And so that's your mindset is, can I do full range of motion? Yes. I can't do full range of motion. Okay. Next, could I do a partial range of motion can I find a pain-free range of motion? If the answer is yes, do that. Can't do that. Then I would do an isometric hold with load where we get the osteoporosis benefits and we can continue to progress in terms of weight. Now, by the way, when you talk about intensity, that's what we're all chasing is intensity. I guarantee you a 60-second hold where you have to hold the weight at a position of like peak muscle torque is much more intense than, hey, for 60 seconds, just push it as hard as you want to, right? You're just going to have a day where you don't push as hard and you're just not going to elicit as much fiber recruitment. So the only thing I'm against is you have other options using a time static contraction approach.
Yeah, no, well said. Thank you for that. Just going back to the chest press, I'm just curious, one of the things I've noticed actually in myself, especially using the horizontal handle near failure is I'll kind of lean forward, right? So I would be, for most of the set, I'll be lean back and then I might lean forward slightly towards the end, I guess, in order to try and get the handles and my elbows to full extent, try and get the handles together. And I see that sometimes in clients and I might sometimes try and correct it, but I'm just curious what you guys do, how you coach around that. Do you see that quite often with clients, especially when they're using a heavier load?
Yeah, coaching points, don't roll the shoulders forward. Don't let the shoulders shrug up toward the ears. You want to keep the shoulders low. So we'll give that cue all the time. Touch the top of the shoulder and say, relax your shoulder, drop your shoulder. It'd be unlikely that we'll terminate the set if the shoulder comes up a little bit. Let me give you an example. More extreme than the MedX chest press is the hammer decline chest press. Your shoulders are going to shrug up a little bit on that if you have heavy load. And I still think the exercise is incredibly effective, even if the shoulders do come up. So we'll allow the shoulders to come up a little bit. I just don't think it changes how much the humerus is adducting. We're going to give that cue. The other cue that we're going to give is we want the humerus to be at about a 45-degree angle. So the humerus is not flared to the side. The humerus is not essentially rubbing up against the torso, but it's splitting the difference. We probably maximize pec recruitment and keep the shoulder in the safest position when we do that. So we will say, hey, drop your elbow a little bit, bring your elbow up a little bit.
Awesome. No, I agree with all that. Just curious, what's the rationale for not allowing the shoulders to roll forward, I guess, which is what happens, right, when you are leaning forward, as I described?
So I think to me, we're no longer contracting or shortening the pec to cause humeral adduction. We are trying to, I think, move the movement arm forward by just leaning into it, right? So what's the point of the exercise? You just continue to think about pulling the humerus together. I mean, that's really what we should be thinking about. Don't push the weight out. Think about pulling your humerus together, which is another great cue as you actually do the exercise.
And I guess if you are rolling the shoulder, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, go ahead, Luke.
When you're doing a multi-joint chest movement, I think it's just a great idea to coach it and think about it like you're doing a pec fly, right? That's what you really should be doing, is think about it like it's a pec fly.
And I'm guessing when you are rolling the shoulder forward, are you going to be recruiting more trapezius and rhomboid? So it's what the body does, right? It starts trying to involve more muscles to help you get the movement arm out, which is against what you're trying to achieve. Is that rationale there, or is it?
Yeah, so I don't agree that we try to recruit more muscle. I think we try to get better leverage, right? I just think we try to put ourselves in a mechanical advantage rather than use more or different muscle.
Okay, got it. Cool. All right. Is there anything? Well, actually, before I say that, if anyone wants to ask a question, please raise a hand or type it in the Q&A or the chat. Oh, we have a question. But before I take your question, Luke, do you have any other? Actually, no. I will take his question first, and then I'll summarize the chest press. So here we go. Luke, you should be able to talk. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear everyone. Thanks for putting this together. Morning.
Most welcome.
Good morning. Probably afternoon view, Lawrence. Okay, so just a bit of a general question, actually. Everybody has these kind of intro sessions where the person that's coming in is not going to sign up, not going to train with you for any appreciable length of time if you don't push them really hard in the first session. Most people that I train are pretty rational, but I do have a couple of people that come in and if you don't kind of destroy them and have them limping out of there, they're probably not going to come back. So I was just kind of asking generally, you've got a eyeball someone, understand, approximate starting weights. But are there any other techniques that Discover Strength uses to kind of increase the intensity when you're completely kind of blind going into something? So like an example is I have someone do a static contraction on the chest press with a yoga block. So they're squeezing it and right at the very end of their set. But just in general, like it's the one thing that I'm always kind of flying by the seat of my pants on. I think I need a bit more of a general plan.
Do that again. What do you do in the chest press?
So when they're kind of in the nearly fully locked out, so right in the kind of the position of the maximum moment arm, I put a yoga block between the handles and have them kind of push and squeeze, because I have a converging 2ST chest press. And then next week I'll have a MedX chest press, which kind of acts very similarly. And yeah, I essentially kind of just have them squeeze the yoga block as hard as they can. So it's kind of all the way that they had been using during their set, plus this kind of static contraction at the top. It does work pretty well. But I would just kind of like general tips about how you would induce more intensity overall in an intro workout.
Yeah, you're asking just an absolutely wonderful question, right? Like, so the way I look at it is you're working with a client that's what we call an intensity 5. So this client is as intense as it gets, and you're trying to introduce them to high intensity training and introductory workout. And you got to realize, first of all, not all of our clients are like this, but this client is used to training in the gym for 2 hours a day and literally doing 8 sets of chest work, right? They're doing 3 sets on a barbell bench, 3 sets on a barbell incline. They're doing 2 sets on a pec fly, or 2 sets of a dip in every single workout. So you got to win them over with one chest exercise, which means you have to elicit the feeling, the sensation that they just did 8 exercises. So what we would do is start off with a normal set, get them to the point where they're at muscle failure, or you realize pretty quickly, Luke, they're not at muscle failure. They're not going to get to muscle failure. They've done 12, 13, 14 standard reps, or if we're using a 10-10 cadence, they've done 5 or 6 reps, then we will stop, have them set the weight down, increase the load significantly, and do about 4 really heavy negatives at the end, which, by the way, the negative is not that heavy because they're already somewhat fatigued going into it. But my goodness, they will wake up the next day, the next 3 days, to have more pec soreness than they've ever had in their life. And you got them, right? Even when they get off that exercise, they'll say, I've just never had my chest feel that way. So we will do that like 90% of the time in that situation. And I've been frustrated before when I've visited HIIT colleagues or other trainers, and they have the weight wrong, and I'm doing literally, 32 reps on something. And I'm thinking, why don't you just stop the set, increase the load by literally 100%, and give me a few heavy negatives? You're going to get to that point. So that is 100% our go-to, is a few really heavy negatives. And the beauty of heavy negatives is they're about as safe as they get in terms of, hemodynamics or cardiovascular risks. I rather do that than do a static hold. We know that negative work, eccentric work, is just not metabolically demanding. So people can tolerate it really well. What do you not want to happen during an introductory workout? You don't want someone to throw up. You don't want them to actually get sick. Well, negative work is a great way to exhaust the muscle without having someone feel sick afterwards.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I've done extended negatives on the weight they were using if it was close, but I've never really stopped the set, up the weight by however many percentage points that would be necessary, and then done it. So that's great.
And Luke, let me back up and say, I should have said this right away. Your concern is like, I want to reach through the computer and hug you, because this is exactly what you should be about. Said, man, if I don't push this person hard enough, they're not going to come back. And I just rarely hear high intensity training practitioners say that. I hear so many people saying, well, we don't want to push people too hard and scare them away. And I respect that. That may be real out there. We just never deal with it. We deal with, well, you didn't push me hard enough. And so I just love what you said, Luke. We're 100% on the same page. You got to push someone hard enough so they understand I couldn't get this on my own.
Yeah, well, that was me. The first time I ever did a leg press properly, I couldn't walk right afterwards. And that was what got me hooked. So, and I tend to attract more people that are like me because they've known me for a long time, just in the business that I was working in before. So I have a bit more exposure to the kinds of people that expect me to push them that hard going into it, at least at the early stages of what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's interesting that over the last 20 years, in my observation, more has been written about high intensity training being about low volume, low frequency. when I got introduced to high intensity training, we rarely talked about low volume and low frequency. We talked about intense. It was high intensity training, which means we went as hard as possible. Like it was taking a set to its absolute limit, not almost to the limit. That's a Ken Leistner quote. High intensity training is taking a set to the limit, not almost to the limit. And I just think that that's been minimized over time. We spend so much time on less volume and less frequency. And if you're talking to someone that likes to train, which a lot of our clients don't, but my goodness, if you meet someone that likes to train and you try to win them over by saying, do less frequency and less volume, they're going to say, what are you talking about? I love to train, but if you say, hey, there's another way, it involves taking a set to its absolute limit. And then you talk about motor unit recruitment, fiber recruitment, and all of that. That's how you win that person over, man. When I was 17 years old and got introduced to high intensity training, if you told me it was just train less, I would say, well, no, I'm good. I'm fine training a lot. But when you told me, hey, the way you've been training in the past, you've actually never worked hard before, that got my attention. Now, everything I just said there doesn't apply to all of our clients, clearly.
Great. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Luke. Luke Hammond, and Luke, obviously, for the great answer. Great question. I'm going to mute you, but if you've got any other questions, just raise a hand, okay? All right. Cool. Okay. Any other final points just to round off the chest press, Luke? Any other kind of final thoughts you've got? Piece of advice on instructing exercise on that?
No.
No? Okay. Sorry, I missed the first time you said that. All right. So let's see here. So Luke, do you have your hand still raised? Do you have another question? And I'll hit allow to talk here. Oh, hang on a sec.
Oh, sorry about that. I do have another question, but I wasn't raising it just then. But I can ask it if we've got
absolutely.
Got some time.
Yeah. You take advantage. Go for it.
Sure. Great. Yes. So I pretty much do abdominal training with everybody. After the initial phases, I have a kind of clamshell Nautilus Nitro abdominal machine. I also have an older MedX Torso Flexion. And this weekend, I'm picking up a MedX, just general abdominal, with the kind of movement arm comes down in front of you and all that. And I have been experiencing better results and people feeling the exercise better when I do purely a static on those machines, not the torso flexion. That works better dynamically, a bit more complicated. But I just kind of, as Discover Strength, I've heard you in podcasts previously saying that you don't really think abdominal work is that necessary. I know that it's one of those things that people remember, that an ab burn. And so I just kind of general tips on that. I like the static. I personally do dynamic and then static myself. But mostly at the moment, I up the weight by 20 to 30% of what their dynamic weight would be and just have them hold it for 60 seconds if they can. Because it's a complicated movement too, people do better with that than they do with, making sure they don't slide the pad on their back and all that other stuff. So kind of just general abdominal questions.
Yeah. So I have no issue with that. I think that's a great idea. I would do what you originally said. I mean, we more often will do a range of motion. And then at the point of failure, or at the end of the set, we will do a static hold at the end of the set. So we'll do a static hold in a contracted position, in a position of peak muscle torque, which is like halfway down. We'll have them hold for 20 seconds or 30 seconds as a way to finish the exercise. If the weight's too light after they've done 12, 13 repetitions, we might make it heavier and then do that static hold. I also think heavy eccentrics on a MedX abdominal is about as good as it gets. And I will echo what you said. I have said on the podcast, I don't care about training abs myself. Like I have a notebook here of all of my workouts, or a folder of all of my workouts, and like an actual physical workout card of my workout. And the exercise that I'm most likely to skip, which skip means you put an asterisk through it, you don't do it, is abdominal. I look at my last 10 workouts, I did abdominal one time because I just skip it at the end of the workout. So personally, I could care less if I do it. However, I think to win over a client, you have to train the abs. The objective to be this person in the introductory workout or any workout going forward will say, I've never had my abs feel that way in my life. Now you got to remember, most of our clients came from health clubs where they were doing 45-minute core conditioning classes. And if you can't elicit that look of confusion where they stare at you like, how after 2 minutes do my abs feel more exhausted than my 45-minute core conditioning class, right? That's what we're going for. They need to be able to say, I've never had my abs feel that way. So I just 100% agree with you again there, Lucas. You got to train the abs early on, and you have to win somebody over with the intensity and the focus of the abdominal training. You can't give them a weak set of abdominal and say, just so you know, this is as good as your core conditioning class. And they think, well, it doesn't feel like it. I mean, you have to give them that actual feel.
Yeah. And on that machine, especially, I've had times that one of my middle abs is like popped out and stayed stuck out for about 20 minutes afterwards. So you can get there with people. Whether or not they can handle that feeling, I don't know. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. A lot of people just they've been conditioned to expect that too, regardless of whether it actually achieves the results they want. So,
because I know plenty of high intensity training practitioners, and we've had this happen before where the introductory workout is over and the client leaves and they've become a client, they like it, but they say, this is my strength training workout, but I still have to do abs or core work, or I have to do Pilates just for my core because that didn't get the job done on my abs, right? Because the HIIT practitioner is like, we're going to do a crunch in the bottom of the torso arm and that's going to get your abs. No, not the client. They're going to think you're going to have no credibility with them, and they're going to say, no, I'm doing abs on my own when I go home. And I would bet that you know, a 50% of high intensity training practitioners, you know, businesses, their clients are doing ab work on their own because the HIIT practitioner is not getting the job done in the actual workout. And to me, that's a missed opportunity. Like, you want your brand, you want to be known for, we do the most effective, most intensive, thorough ab training, you know, on earth.
Agreed. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luke.
Which we've even made the mistake of opening studios where we didn't buy a MedX Torso rotation. And our original studios had MedX Torso rotations, and we'd launch a new one and we didn't buy it because I didn't want to spend it, you know, $7,000 on the machine. And I'm like, is it really that big of a deal? And there's an uproar from clients saying, well, geez, there's no torso rotation here. You don't have a torso rotation. You don't have a torso rotation. I'm thinking literally it's like the least important exercise that we do. But now every one of our locations has a torso rotation because our clients are addicted to it. And I just have to face that reality, is that people will judge the workout experience by how you train, how effectively you train. By effectively, I mean how intensely and the feeling that they get after training abdominals in your business.
Yeah. And just to add to the torso rotation point, I get a lot of golfers purely coming because of that machine, regardless. And I think there's probably some benefit to it for them. But yeah, it's that thing too. I can say this is a machine that'll maybe help with your golf swing. And when they feel that twisting, which is analogous to twisting during a swing, then they're like, okay, great. I've never felt that before. I'll be back next week. See you then.
Totally agree. 100% agree. 100% agree.
Awesome. Great questions again, Luke. Yeah. And just to add to that, it's funny because my female colleague who's becoming a trainer / my business partner's wife, she's obsessed with getting one of those. And I don't know whether there's a bias towards women. Have you found that, Luke, for the torso rotation? Is there more women that want that than men?
I'm not sure on torso rotation. I think on abdominal, this is my stereotype. I think women overall care about abdominal training more than men do. That's a stereotype, but I'm not sure about torso rotation. I definitely think golfers care about torso rotation. I would love to do a study where you have one group only do torso rotation and then measure like club head speed or driving distance for a golfer, and have the other group do a full body workout, but not train the midsection at all. And I would put money that the full body, upper body and leg, that they increase club head speed and driving distance off the tee far superior than the group that does torso rotation. Now, I think there's benefit to doing it all. So Lawrence, I'm not sure if there's a leaning on the torso rotation toward females as well.
Okay. No, that's still very interesting. Luke, this has been awesome as always. It's 5:02, so I figured it'd be an ideal time to wrap up. Again, we only talked about a few pieces there, but I think that's fine. We got into some real detail. Again, we can cover the others another time. And there were some great questions from Luke, which I think has just rounded out this episode. Go ahead.
So I just think it's important to wrap up and say, what I suggested, I don't think any of these things are laws. If I had your listeners take anything out of this, I would say, what's your approach to deciding how you're going to do the exercise? I think it's look at the biomechanics. It's understand the biomechanics. It's look at any relevant research on the topic, because there is sometimes some research on, hey, what happens when you change the position of how you're using the leg extension, right? Understanding what happens when you point a toe versus when you don't point a toe in a leg extension. Understand the biomechanics, and then talk to people, talk to believable others, and sort through these things and think about what works for your clients and what's practical for your client. You can't get into who you're only going to listen to one believable other, because there's so many just absolute, we could say, hit luminaries that coach exercises totally differently. And so you can't say, well, this person has more credibility, I'm going to listen to them. That's a bias, right? So I think you have to have the conversations with everyone and keep an open mind and look at what you're trying to achieve with the exercise. And that's the fun of all of it, right? How are you going to perform the exercise? And it's a constant learning process. And when you really get good, I think the key is, do you have a filter? Can you listen to a believable other and not apply everything they say? Like my head would spin if I get off the phone with Bill DeSimone, he said this, and I say, I have to abandon everything I just thought. Then I talk to James Fisher, the next day, and he says something that conflicts with Bill's, and I say, I don't know how to make sense of it. So you have to have the filter to move through all of this stuff and decide, how do you want it done in your business, in your facility, with your clients? And then you need consistency within your business.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a great piece of advice. It can be so paralyzing. I found it's so fascinating. Like, I found the personal training and the workout programming way more complicated than the actual business stuff. I mean, obviously that is the business, but you know what I mean? Like the systems and marketing and what have you. And it can be so paralyzing when you're hit with so many different viewpoints and about something that's already very complicated. And like you say, a lot of us will appeal to authority by default, but that's not necessarily that productive. Luke, awesome as always. I'd like you do you want to just mention, I guess, the franchise opportunity and anything else to point the members to at this time?
Yep. So you can go to discoverstrength.com, but we also have discoverstrengthfranchise.com if they want to learn more about what our franchise opportunity looks like.
Great. Thank you. And just for everyone who's participated, this is obviously recorded and will be transcribed for future reference in case you want to watch it back. Thank you so much for being a member in Hit Business Membership. And the last thing I want to mention is we have the virtual happy hour this Friday, February 26th, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Luke, are you free? Are you joining us?
I'll be there.
Oh, awesome. Good. So this will be, well, for everyone who's attending today, I'd love to see you at the virtual happy hour. And obviously anyone who watches this after the live recording today, please try and attend that. And you can find that over at the membership. Just go to Meetups. Meetups Around the World is the name of the thread, and you'll see it on the email from me. Luke, again, just want to say thank you so much for taking the time today to do this. Super interesting, really useful. And thanks to all the members for attending.